You've been searching for the best way to generate passive income in your life and heard that real estate is a great way to do it. But you're tired of all the so-called gurus who are all talk and no substance. Get ready to celebrate because Kevin Buck has spent 14 years successfully making it happen. This is the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Now, here's Kevin Buck.
Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here with episode number 173 of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, where our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Now, before I introduce our guest for today's show, I want to mention a very important item regarding this show, and I actually mentioned this a few weeks ago, and that was over the next few months, I'm going to be releasing a number of interviews that have been somewhat lost in the archives. That's the best way to put it. They were lost in the archives, and they were simply just never released. And it's not because they weren't absolutely awesome or they weren't jam-packed full of incredible value, but more so they accidentally fell, I guess, through the cracks, and they never made it on our show schedule. Okay, so that's kind of what today's show is all about. Today's show is one of them, and it's an awesome show. I feel actually really guilty that this thing didn't get out earlier. It's an awesome show, and it would pain me dearly for you guys not to hear it and take away the incredible value that you're going to find in this interview. So, with that being said, our guest for this week's show is public insurance claims adjuster and industry expert Scott Freidson. Now, owning a rental property it's a great thing, right? It's an incredible thing when things are going well. But what happens if your precious investment property sustains major damages or maybe even a complete loss? Well, in today's show, Scott is going to share a step-by-step advice on how to successfully navigate the claims process should you encounter an unfortunate event that causes major damage to your property, your investment property. And probably even more important, Scott is going to share how to avoid being scammed by contractors, unlicensed adjusters, or getting shorted on your total insurance payout because you used an adjuster that worked for the insurance company versus an outside private adjuster like Scott, who is working in your best interest. And I know this stuff, it's kind of dry, right? Insurance, not all that fun, kind of boring, but it's vitally important if you own real estate. The uneducated real estate investors, the uneducated ones on this topic, are the ones that lose big time when a loss actually occurs. Now, you need to prepare yourself ahead of time because knowledge really is power in this situation. So I'm very excited to get on to the show with Scott, but before we do, I just have a few quick updates I want to run through with you guys. We are in buying mode. This is the first update. We are in buying mode. You guys, if you don't know, we like mobile home parks. That's what our niche is. That's what we focus in, and we are looking for more mobile home parks to purchase. So while you're out there hunting for deals, whether it be apartment complexes, shopping centers, single-family homes, wholesale deals, whatever it might be, when you're out there on the hunt, keep your eyes peeled for mobile home park opportunities. I would love to write you a big fat finder's fee, a finder's check for a great opportunity that you might bring our way. Or maybe you run across an opportunity that looks good, but you don't have either maybe the capital or the track record, or maybe you don't have both. You're lacking both of those items, and you'd like to take it down, but you need a team with a proven track record to help you do that. Well, please think of us, okay? We'd love to chat with you about any potential opportunities you have. It could be basically across the entire United States, all 50 states. We're looking for parks that are a minimum of 50 or 60 spaces in size, and there's really no maximum. We'll look at portfolio deals that are in thousands of spaces in size, $25, $30 million portfolios, okay? So we can buy small, we can also buy very large, but the minimum size that we're really looking for is 50 to 60 spaces in size. And if you have an opportunity that you'd like to run past me, just shoot me an email. My personal email address is kevin@kevinbupp.com. Again, kevin@kevinbupp.com. And we actually have two deals that we're working on right now that essentially, if they close, we'll end up paying out near $200,000 on. So I'd love to put that $200,000 check in your pocket as well. So if you run across an opportunity, be sure to reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you about it. Next up, guys, I just want to give you an update regarding our mobile home park fund. You'll know that we just finished out our first successful Reg D 506C offering and are very happy with the parks that we purchased, as well as the many different investors that we've had the pleasure of partnering with. Well, there were a lot of you also that were looking to get in, but the timing just ran out, and we kind of capped it off. Well, we hate turning investors away. We hate turning potential partners away, but the good news is that we have a second fund that we're currently putting together. We're working on the behind-the-scenes work right now and getting that launched sometime in Q2 of this year. So literally in the coming months, we plan on rolling out the second mobile home park fund. So if you'd like to be on the first to know basis on this fund and when it rolls out, because we feel like we believe it's going to fill up very quickly. It's going to subscribe very quickly. So if you'd like to be on the first to know basis, go to our website, sunrisecapitalinvestors.com, and create a free account inside our investment portal. Again, this will put you on the first to know basis for when fund number 2 rolls out. Again, the first fund, we had to turn a number of investors away. We don't want to have to turn you away again. So if you have an interest in working with us, please just go fill out that free account in sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. Create your free account, and we'll make sure that you get notified as soon as we're ready to roll with that. Okay. In addition to that, you can even schedule a call with our team and get on the phone, and any questions that you might have regarding the second opportunity about us as a team. We'd love to get on the phone with you and chat with you in more detail and tell you a little bit more about ourselves. Okay. Lastly, guys, if you happen to be in the Tampa Bay area, I'd love to meet you in person. I love meeting others that share the same passions I do for real estate investing. It doesn't need to be mobile home parks. It can be any type of real estate. I just like talking shop, and it doesn't even matter if you're brand new to the business and if you haven't bought your first property yet. If you find yourself in the Tampa Bay area and you've got some free time, shoot me an email before you come to town. Let's see if we can coordinate our schedules. Again, personal email address is kevin@kevinbupp.com. Okay, guys. Well, now let's get on to the part of the show that you've been waiting for, which is our interview with Scott. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, today on the show, we are excited to welcome back insurance claims adjustment expert and CEO of Insurance Claim Recovery Support, Scott Freidson. And for those of you who haven't yet heard my last interview with Scott, be sure to go check out episode number 103, where Scott and I discuss the role of a public insurance adjuster and when we investors should request their help when dealing with a loss on one of our precious rental properties. And being that Scott and I only had an hour or so to talk the first time around, we really were only able to scratch the surface on this very important topic. And so I thought it'd be valuable to bring Scott back on so we could give a little bit deeper insight as to the whole process and what it means to you, the policyholder. And so Scott recently held a free seminar for the Texas Policyholder Advocates Organization, where he taught everything we, the policyholder, should know when it comes to handling an insurance claim. And so in today's show, we're going to cover everything that you need to know if you are ever in the position where you need to do just that. And so without further ado, let's welcome back Scott Freidson to the show. Scott, how you doing today?
Great, Kevin. Thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And last time that we chatted, we spent an hour on the topic, and it's probably a topic that we could probably talk hours on, right? I mean, we could probably have an entire day talking about the different scenarios and what to do if this happens, what to do if that happens. And so, we were only able to really scratch the surface last time around. And so, you recently held this free seminar, this free educational session on this particular topic on the policyholder and what to do in an event of a loss. And so what I'd like to do today with you, Scott, is I'd really like to actually just go through what it is you teach at that free event, and we can just really go from A to Z so that all the listeners really know what to do when they're, when they have to deal with a loss, because it's inevitable, right? I mean, at some point in time, if you own property, whether it's your primary residence or it's a rental property, in fact, you're more prone to it probably if you own multiple rental properties, because the odds are against you at that point in time that something's going to happen. You're going to have to file a claim. And so I really want our listeners to really have a firm understanding after we get off this call here today as to what exactly they need to know to be educated policyholders and what they need to do in order to, successfully navigate through this the claims process. So why don't we start off with, I'll pass the mic back to you here for a minute, Scott. And just real quick, before we dig into the meat and potatoes of it, for those that maybe didn't listen to our last show together, that episode 103 that I mentioned, just really briefly tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what it is you do.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So I'm like you mentioned earlier. I am a public insurance adjuster, and I'm licensed in multiple states. I'm headquartered in Texas. And what most people don't know is that a public adjuster can legally represent the rights of an insured policyholder, and works strictly for a policyholder, as opposed to an insurance company, to make sure that your rights and your policy provisions and endorsements and the statutes and all, the interpretation of your policy isn't skewed only towards with the eye of a carrier. This way you have equal representation, if you will, kind of balance the scales, if you will. And that's the long and the short of it. And it's a great alternative to either A, handling on your own, B, having a contractor handle it for you, or C, having an attorney handle it for you, for multiple reasons. First of all, the public adjuster has the authority to legally negotiate and settle insurance claims, whereas a contractor, who is very important to the process, but they're a vendor, and the insurance carriers are very well informed of that. And a lot of times people find themselves very frustrated when they are dealing or strictly relying on a contractor. And that's the reason why, is that they don't have any authority to settle a claim, especially if you get into some kind of dispute. And then, of course, there's a legal route, and there's also appraisal. There are alternative methods to settling insurance claims, which is why I formed the nonprofit, and with the support of an incredible board of directors, we've been able to really be successful in raising awareness to the consumer and both home and business owners in areas that have been affected by catastrophic losses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So that was really the need that you saw in the marketplace. You saw that policyholders were really somewhat holding their hand up, saying, I really don't understand all this, and you guys saw the need and the void there to get out there and educate the public. Is that how this all came about?
Yeah, for sure. People just don't know what they don't know until they know.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that our MO is to avoid a lawsuit like the plague. Now, that's not to say that it's unavoidable, but a lot of claims that we find are end up in the hands of litigation. They may have had a better shot of actually just getting settled quicker for the same amount if they had proper representation. Mm-hmm. And part of that whole model is because you have to remember that the insurance companies and a lot of their attorneys are paid hourly. And a lot of the plaintiff attorneys are paid on contingency. So obviously, they want to move things along as quickly as possible when you're dealing with a plaintiff attorney. And the same thing is true for a public adjuster. Public adjusters are typically work on a contingency fee agreement, and they want things to get moved along, whereas many of the staff adjusters or independent adjusters are either hourly or salaried, and there's no incentive for them to get things moving along.
Gotcha. Okay. So why don't we do this? What I'd like to do, Scott, is I know we have a lot to go through here today. So why don't we just start in the very beginning, kind of walk us through the structure of this free event that you've put on. And I think the very first topic that you go into discuss is, what to look out for being a policyholder when dealing with wind and water damage insurance claims. Tell us, kind of the background of that portion of the discussion and what we really need to be looking out for.
Sure. Well, that the one that you're referring to is for a tornado event that happened in the Garland-Rowlett area right after Christmas. Mm-hmm. $1.2 billion in insurable losses is what they were projected to come to. Wow. So yeah, and so it's not just wind and water; it's hail, it's fire, it's everything. And really, the thing that one of the very first things that we talk about in our seminars when it comes to what to look out for is, for number one, especially if it's an act of God, if you will, is to file a claim, to put your carrier on notice immediately. Even if you're not 100% sure, if you think you may have a claim, if you were near a path or if there's hail in the area, one of the few things that is required of a policyholder is to provide your carrier with prompt notice. So, and if there ends up being no damage, you can just, you can say, look, there's no damage, take this, close this down and don't let it show up on my report. One of the very first things that we find that people are afraid of filing a claim is they're afraid that their rates are going to go up. And it's important that people understand that when it's an act of nature, if you will, they are not going to be considered to be a negligent or high risk, the individual insured policyholder. The area, and they refer to it as a tier, may be a higher risk. So if there's a bunch of tornado activity in Dallas, or a bunch of hailstorms in Dallas, or a hurricane in Houston or Florida or wherever, North Carolina, wherever it may be, your rate won't go up necessarily. The entire tier will go up, usually by a county or multiple county area. So that's the very first thing people need to understand. Now, where people need to worry about their individual rates going up is if you're a smoker and you fall asleep smoking a cigarette on your couch and you burn your house down, now you're the high risk.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely, it does. And so, just to clarify here, so what you're saying is, so if there's some kind of natural catastrophic event that happens, a tornado, a hurricane, hailstorm, whatever it might be, even if you think you don't have damage on your property, like you walk outside, you do a quick walk around inspection, you don't see anything, you're saying that you should probably still file a claim? I mean, if there's even a remote thought that there might be something that was damaged that you just aren't seeing yet?
It's better to be safe than to be sorry, in my opinion, because that's part of what you're paying your premiums for. Is part of the premium payment is for claims handling. Okay. And so the thing is that if you don't have a trained eye, or if you're an older person and you're getting up on your roof to look at the damage, then that's why the insurance companies have claims adjusters to go and look at that. You're better off to just have someone take a look. There's nothing there. There's nothing there. But if you see your neighbors are having issues, and you see a bunch of broken tree limbs around you, and there's a bunch of leaves on the ground, or you see soft metal damage on gutters and downspouts, or a broken or cracked window, those are all indicators there could be some damage. And a lot of times people don't think about that. Wind and hail and those types of events are directional, and so one side of your property may look just fine. And so if you've only done just one look through on one side, you may be surprised to find that you've got whole nother area that's been impacted by some kind of an event. Mm-hmm. And the reason we say it's important to do it sooner rather than later is because a lot of times people will notice leaks in roofs, especially with a flat roof, or it doesn't matter what kind, but they'll start noticing either condensation in their windows or things of that nature, but it could be months down the line. Yeah. Okay, so now you're 6-8 months, a year down the line before you actually start noticing stuff on the interior, and then you can start running into some problems with late notice and things of that nature.
Yeah, no, I actually have a perfect example of something that happened on a rental property we had. And we had a lot of rental property in the path of Hurricane Charlie back in, I guess it was 2004 when that hurricane took place here in Florida. And one of the property I'm thinking of, from the exterior, I mean, it was right in the path. It didn't get a direct hit, but I mean, it was right in the path. And other than like tree limbs and things of that, things like easy cleanup items, the house itself looked like it hadn't sustained any type of damage whatsoever. And so we had a lot of other properties we were dealing with, and so we just moved on to the next, because most of the other ones, I think every single other property we had some type of damage to it. That one had no visible damage, but what had happened is, and this is what we found out, like 2 years later, it really started showing itself. And what had happened is there was some kind of defect in how the stucco was put on the side of the house, and the wind actually blew to the side of the house and around the windows and up at the soffits and everything. There wasn't a good seal in the concrete and the stucco where it actually touched to the roof of the house, and the water had worked its way down in there. However, I don't know exactly where it actually entered. We still couldn't figure it out, but we had a massive mold and condensation problem inside that house 2 years down the road. Around every single window on the side of that house, we basically had to rebuild the entire side of the house. I mean, it was it was a nightmare, and we couldn't figure out for life, at least us, our basic handymen and contractors that do a lot of work for us. We couldn't figure out where the heck the mold was coming from in the interior, because it had worked its way in, and because there was just literally a ton of condensation just sitting on the inside of the walls. It was a 2-story home, and the bottom half is block. the top half is frame here in Florida. That's how they build them. And the frame portion, we literally had to rebuild pretty much the entire side of the house is what it came down to. And we didn't know it until 2 years after the fact. And it was a very costly repair item that probably could have been identified if we would have had someone like yourself come in and take a look at it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so what happened on that, it sounds like, you may have had something that was a legitimate claim, but because now the other thing that most policies have is, you have a duty to mitigate. So if you have something that happens and if you don't, you're up on your roof every day and you didn't look at it and you didn't mitigate it, and the next thing you know, you've got roof leaks and mold and you don't realize it until stuff starts coming through your ceiling. That gives the carrier ammunition to deny your claim because it is deferred maintenance, or it could be poor workmanship, or there's a lot of different things that they use that's not that disqualifies a loss to be covered. So that's one of the things you definitely got to look out for.
Yep, sure thing. Okay, so I want to talk about for those that are listening and that maybe have never had to make a claim before, and thank God for them, right? I mean, they haven't had to go through this process yet, but I want to give them the overview of what this the entire process might look like for them when the time comes. Again, hopefully it never happens, but if the time comes, they have to make a claim. What does it look like?
Well, before we dive into that, I came across an interesting little statistic today. I thought I wanted to share with you on the show is that roughly 40 to 60% of small businesses have never reopened their doors following a disaster. And I got that off of a website called preparemybusiness.org, and they've got all kinds of really good disaster assistance and planning tools. So that might be a resource for people to check out. But the very first thing, obviously, the best thing you can do is actually review your policy before you have an occurrence and know what the heck you're buying, and understand that. There's actual cash value and there's replacement cost value policies, and there are certain things that you really need to have a full understanding. As much as an investor has a full understanding of the reward side of their business, they also need to have a full understanding of the risk side of their business. And I think we even mentioned at our last radio interview was, in my opinion, people manage risk by having good management, and in the event of something unforeseen happens, through a good solid insurance policy. So that's the very first thing, is make sure you know what you're buying and make sure it's not a bunch of junk. Sometimes you can save a little bit of money on a premium, but if you are not buying something that is top quality because you're so focused on your return, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for getting a good return on your investment, but the thing is, if you don't have a decent policy with decent coverage, you can find yourself in a very long and frustrating, slow-moving insurance claim process. So from the very beginning, know your policy. Number two is when an occurrence takes place, whether, no matter what it is, immediately photograph damage. Okay. I don't care where or what, but everybody's got smartphones now. Take out your phone, take video, no matter how significant or insignificant you think it may be. Devil's in the details. So take pictures, especially if it's hail, or if you can get pictures of wind, as it's occurring on the damage. If you have a maintenance person or some property managers, somebody who may even live on site, just to give them a heads up. Hey, if this ever happens, if you could, I really need you to take pictures of, don't go outside in harm's way, but like following the event or from inside where it's safe. From there, obviously, you want to put your carrier on notice, call your agent, tell them you have a claim, get the claim number, write it down, put everything in writing. I prefer to give people, you can call them, get a claim number, but then send an email saying, it's my understanding that my claim number is whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and find out when they can have an adjuster come out, and, and away we go. So, that's the very, bare minimum what you want to do at the very beginning. You want to mitigate, put them on notice, look to your policy for coverage. Don't be afraid of if you have interior damages, or if you need to get someone to come out to extract water or things of that nature. Do it. That's why you have insurance. Your policy typically will cover that type of expense, and a lot of these guys will just bill your insurance company direct. From there, you want to obviously get some estimates on the reconstruction process. What is it? And this is where things kind of can get dicey, right? Especially, one of the biggest things that people need to understand is that there are total losses, which is why people insure for the property dollar amount that they use. They use in their policies, is in the event if it's a total loss. Well, most claims are not total losses. They are partial losses. And those are the types of claims where disputes can arise because it's subjective. Mm-hmm. The repair versus replace dispute takes place. Well, can it be repaired? Well, we want it to be replaced. Well, the building code says this. The city says that. The policy says this. My contractor says that. And so, the insurance company wants to do it this way. And so, somebody pays big bucks and pays the premiums for full replacement policy, and they have a loss, they want full replacement. But, insurance companies are driven by shareholders as well as policyholders, and it's a business. And so, they need to deliver value for both. And there's in my opinion, you've got an inherent conflict of interest built into an insurance company model if they're not owned by their own, by their own policyholders.
Mm-hmm. No, so, really, Scott? No, come on.
You'd be surprised, right? But, so it goes. And so that's why having some kind of representation from the very beginning is really important. I mean, most people have no idea how to deal with an insurance claim, but you got to remember that your insurance company has experts that work for them. That's all they do every day, all day long. And if they were giving people what they're entitled to when they are entitled to it, there'll be somebody else that will offer them to do it for less and, get the insurance company more money.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And so you actually, just to clarify, a public insurance adjuster will actually help negotiate on the policyholder's behalf, correct? With the insurance company.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. No, not with the insurance. Well, no. They will represent your interest. It's like this. Everybody that's listening to this radio show more than likely used a real estate broker when they purchased or sold a property, right? So, the person who represents you as your buyer rep is supposed to only represent your interest in the purchase of the acquisition of that asset, the best price, the due diligence, the demographics, everything that goes into that deal, right? Financing, whatever needs to be involved with it. Same thing with the seller. So, I kind of look at myself as a buyer rep, if you will, when it comes to representing a policyholder with insurance claims. We want to get them everything they're entitled to when they're entitled to it, and we keep the insurance company, aware of all the rights and the endorsements in the policy, and we ask for everything that they are entitled to. Okay, sounds good. And actually, there's a question I had, Scott, a couple minutes back. I want to just get out of the way before I forget about it. As I get older, my memory gets worse, so I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there. So I don't want to digress from our topic here, but you had mentioned that people should know if they have a good policy or bad policy. They should know exactly what they have and what their policy covers, right? I mean, how does someone know that? I mean, are there independent consultants, or is it something to where they could bring it to a company like yourself and say, hey, here's the policies I'm looking at. Can you give me some guidance? I mean, that's
how do they do that?
Question. Yeah. Well, Stephen Covey said it best, begin with the end in mind, right? And so my first suggestion is you go with an insurance agent or brokerage that is an independent agent. In other words, not captive to just one insurance company. Okay, so they can shop it for you. Number two is, a lot of folks are with property management companies who have master policies, and a lot of those master policies have multiple layers in them. And that's also important to know, at what point does this layer kick out and this one kicks in, right? So it can get real complicated. And a lot of them are surplus line carriers, and the short answer is yes. A good public adjuster or a plaintiff attorney would be happy to take a look at that, look at a policy for you. we do that all the time, and we'll let people know, yeah, this is good. Or next time you go to renew, look to see if you can get something with reimbursement of professional fees, such as an engineer. Make sure you have business, loss of income in case some of your units or some of your property becomes unleasable, things of that nature. And then also, look at, there's an organization called FightBadFaithInsuranceCompanies.org, and they publish a list of the best and worst insurance carriers based on their claims handling practices. So that's a real good resource to check out. What's the reputation like of these companies. And, another thing that people could do is very easily pick up the phone and talk to, a PA or a plaintiff attorney that handles insurance claims in your local area and ask them, what's your opinion on these guys? How, do you have a lot of cases with them, or who do you have the least amount of cases with, or who do you have the least amount of issues with, that kind of thing. I wish people would ask us that question more often.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's kind of a foreign topic to a lot of property owners, whether it's their primary residence or even investment properties. I think they kind of just take what their insurance company or their insurance provider gives them. I mean, whatever policy that either their broker or maybe it's a direct insurance company where it's just that independent source. It's not a brokerage or anything. They just kind of say, okay, well, this is the best for your particular property and your circumstance. Here you go, and the property owner's like, okay, great. Sounds good. Thank you.
It's painful and it's boring. I mean, there's nothing more boring than insurance is talking about litigation about or legislation about insurance. But
it's a necessary evil
until it's your turn, right? Until it's your turn, and then you're like, what did I buy? So, and one last thing on this topic, because I have friends that are agents for insurance companies, and this is for all the investors out there. They need to pay very, very close attention to this. Is that price is what you pay, value is what you get, and if you're just focused on price, and if you're just beating up your agent for best price, you can get some pretty bad, cheap, garbage policies that are worth about the paper that they're written on. But the whole point of having insurance is so that in the event something happens, you don't have to go through hell and back to get indemnified. So it's very, very important. Be reasonable. Take a look. I would get 2 or 3 estimates on your policies, and go with one that's got a good reputation and one you can understand that's affords you the coverage that you need. Yeah, not just what your lender wants you to get.
Right. I mean, it goes back to the old adage of like you get what you pay for, and that applies to most things in life, and it obviously applies to insurance as well. So don't always just go for the lowest rate. That's not how you shop insurance. So I think that's a great point you made. Real quick, that website again you'd mentioned where we can go actually research carriers to find out what their what their ratings look like.
Yeah, it's we have it linked to on our website, but it's FightBadFaithInsuranceCompanies.com. I'll send you a link.
FightBadFaithInsuranceCompanies.com. Okay.
Or .org, I believe. Yeah, .org.
Gotcha. That's a long one. They could have made that any shorter.
I know.
Okay.
The longest one I could find.
So what's the next thing that we need to know about here as we go through this process, Scott?
Well, so here you are. You've got, I think, give your insurance company the opportunity to do the right thing. Okay, it's actually badfaithinsurance.org. My bad. So, you want to give them the opportunity to do the right thing because there are a lot of good insurance companies out there, and they do the right thing, and they want to do the right thing, and there's also a lot of good adjusters out there. But that being said, there's also a lot that are not well trained, and they're all focused on the bottom line, and it's a business, and I get that. So my suggestion is, if you don't have the time, because your time is valuable to deal with an insurance claim, and it's always better to have professional representation. It's just like someone that does your taxes or your property tax protesting, anything along those lines. Your own mortgage or an appraisal or building inspection. Everybody's good at something. Nobody's good at everything. So, I would suggest, see how it's going. But if you sense from the very beginning that things aren't going your way, I wouldn't waste any time, because it's very challenging to change a carrier's position once they've dug in. Okay, not impossible, and we do it every day. But don't wait months and weeks or whatever before, and hope. I call it the hope stage. Every time after there's a loss, people hope that it's going to be just like what they see on TV. And, I hope that it does. And frankly, we have a lot of folks that they come to us and everything turns out great and they move on. But a large number of people are underpaid, or they're not, the full scope of their damages aren't covered. And by the time they call us, they're done. They're fried. They're stressed out. They're frustrated. And, we can pick up the ball and go, but I'll tell you one thing for sure, and I've got a lot of general contractors that we work with, and they tell their clients, look, we can do this and we can see how things shake out in 6 months and then engage a public adjuster, or we can just engage a public adjuster and be done in 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have, I mean,
I shouldn't, 6 months is just an example, but, larger losses do typically take, 3 to 6 months to settle.
Okay, that sounds good. So would you recommend, so just to clarify here, so getting a public adjuster involved if we have some kind of dispute, or if we don't feel like, where things are going with the insurance company are absolutely fair, or we're not, the payout's not going to be as much as we think it should be to replace, or fix the damage. I mean, at that point we get them involved, or just get them involved in the beginning just to be safe?
I think it's better to get involved at the very beginning.
Okay.
And here's the big thing, okay? Like for example, in Texas, the fee, everyone says, well, how much is it going to cost, right? Okay, so, a public adjuster in Texas, the maximum that they can charge is 10% of the gross claim less your deductible, okay? But you got to remember that, carriers, they tend to discount where they can. Okay, I'll be nice to say that. But the other thing that's really important that policyholders don't understand or realize is that, we use the same software programs that the insurance companies use, and it's fed by a feed, kind of like a stockbroker, like a stock market feed, right? Like Intel is this price, and we can plug into a feed, and everybody knows what that price is. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, the software, the estimating software that's used by most public adjusters in insurance companies, it's all one and the same, and it's all fed by a third party guide, okay, for pricing for labor and materials in a specific market, in a specific time, and it's updated constantly. Because if there's a hurricane tomorrow in Florida, okay, well, labor and material prices are going to go up. Right, they're not going to be the same today as they were last week if a hurricane hits tomorrow. Right. So that's important. Now, the other thing that people need to understand is that pricing for labor and materials is basically retail. I mean, it's not discount. It's not a competitive bid. It's just, and it's a market. It's an average market retail price for what stuff costs. Okay, so it's important that people understand that, because when it comes down to the pricing of the scope of your damages, all right, the price is never really what's in dispute, all right, because a square of shingles is a square of shingles per the program. Where the disputes come into place is a scope. Okay, so the insurance company may want to do a repair, and they may want to spot repair shingles on your apartment complex. Mm-hmm. Okay, and we may go up there and go, well, we just did a test square, and per this test square, the results indicate that this whole roof needs to be replaced, not just spot repaired. And the other thing is, this is an unreasonable request to spot repair. We've got a 200-unit apartment complex. How are we going to identify individual shingles that we need to spot repair here? And who's going to warrant that? Right? So these are the kinds of issues that can come up. And so you're much better off just getting somebody that knows the show and get it done.
Okay, sounds good. And so once we engage a public adjuster like yourself, is there a point in time to where if things still aren't going as we would hope, that we are going to need to seek legal counsel, or is that something that the public adjuster would handle?
No, that's a great question. So, there's two remedies that a policyholder can typically exercise in the event you reach an impasse with the insurance company, okay, either you yourself or with the representation of a public adjuster. And those two are either appraisal, which is a non-litigious process. It's kind of like mediation, where there's two appraisers, one for the insurance company, one from the for the policyholder, and then the two appraisers select an umpire, and that's kind of like an arbitrator, if you will. And it takes 2 out of 3 opinions on the scope and price to make a binding award. Okay, so it could be 2 appraisers, or it could be 1 appraiser and an umpire. All right, and there you go. The thing that's great about the appraisal process is it's non-litigious, so there's no discovery, there's no depositions, there's no court dates, no attorneys, that kind of stuff. Okay, the thing that I'm not horribly wild about with appraisal is in most, I don't know of an area where this isn't the case, but the policyholder has to pay out of pocket for an appraiser, and they have to split the fee of an umpire out of pocket. And so, and it doesn't take into account for the amount of time that an appraisal can take. So there's no additional damages for, like, say, for example, prepayment penalty interest that accrues. The other thing is that a lot of policies have language where the carrier still reserve the right to deny a claim even if there's an award made. Okay. The other thing is that there's very few rules of the road with appraisal. It can be difficult and challenging to compel an appraiser for the other side to perform because there's no repercussions really. And then lastly is that in the event that you do win, and you're a year or 2 years down the line from the occurrence, and they pay you what you felt like you're entitled to from day one. In a lot of states, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know this for a fact with all states, but I know in many, many, many states that once an appraisal award has been paid, you can't go back with an attorney and go after exemplary damages, for example, like late payment or underpayment, things of that nature. It's once the appraisal award has been paid, it releases the carrier of all wrongdoing, if you will. So there's that, and it's a tool, and it's effective, but to me, and that's one of the things we want to do at Texas Policyholder Advocates is we want to provide a recovery mechanism for policyholders who invoke appraisal, so that if they win, then they should be reimbursed for the expenses of having to hire, retain an appraiser. So now, before we get into legal, do you have any questions about appraisal?
Yeah, I do have one question about appraisals. Is it the actual appraiser themselves? Are they just normal property appraisers, or do they have specific credentials that allow them to appraise claim damage?
Great question. Typically, they are not licensed. They are, an appraiser, at least in Texas, can be pretty much anybody. It could be your contractor. It can pretty much be anybody. Okay, and that to me is a little it's a little frightening. And the thing is that the appraisal, you can only appraise what there has been damage extended. So in other words, let's say that you don't agree with the roof. Okay. That they want to do a partial, and then you get to appraisal, and then you want to throw windows in there or siding or something like that. Well, if that wasn't part of the scope of the carrier where they admitted liability, like they agree to pay for, a window or part of your siding, that can be interpreted as not part of the appraisal panel, the appraisal scope. And so, so there's that. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. That's scary. I didn't realize that appraisers in Texas did not have to be licensed. Oh my gosh.
I think that's true for most states, and that's a whole nother bag of worms that doesn't excite me about appraisal. Yeah,
that's a little scary when you think about it. Okay. So let's talk about the legal side of it.
Okay. Now, one other quick thing. Let me preface by saying that if you have a public adjuster that works with you, and then if something goes into appraisal, or especially with legal, let's talk about legal. All of that stuff, all the work that public adjuster did, estimate and the correspondence and the demands and all that stuff, and the data that helps support your claim becomes part of the file. Okay, to be reviewed. And so let's get into legal now. All right. Now, the good news about legal is that a lot of almost every every plaintiff attorney that I know that's worth their salt in the industry works on a contingency basis. So the policyholders have to pay out of pocket for the attorney fees or the expenses. Most attorneys absorb the expenses if they have to hire, engineer or forensic accountant or whatever the case may be. Now, when the claim all settles, obviously the attorney's going to get paid, and a lot of times those attorney fees get built into the damage model. So if you have $500,000 in damages and then $100,000 in attorney fees, it's a $600,000 award, right? And so that's usually how policyholders are recovered for their fees. All right. As opposed to with a public adjuster or an appraiser. Appraiser straight out of pocket. A public adjuster is it's a percentage of the gross claim. Now, going back to legal, then you have, you're going to have discovery. Most likely we'll have depositions. They're going to have experts. I'm assuming we're talking about largely, commercial losses. Mm-hmm. And the bigger the claim, the bigger the fight, and the longer, it takes and all that kind of stuff. And so it's important for people to understand that, I'm always advising people not to get too trigger happy about getting involved in a lawsuit, okay? Because all those steps take time and they take money, and you have to have staying power. And if you have a property that's been severely damaged and you get in with an attorney day one, nothing's going to happen fast. Insurance claims don't move fast anyway. A lot of times what I find is we will, as a public adjuster, we'll get a claim to a point. I'll give you a great example. We're dealing with a client with an apartment complex who initially had an offer of around $180,000 from their carrier, and we've got this claim up in the neighborhood of $1 million.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, and that's because they overlooked a large portion of a flat roof. This property had both pitch and flat roofs and had interior damages, and they only paid for the pitched roofs. Well, the flat roofs are 2 layers. There's all kinds of stuff that go into it. We finally got the carrier to extend liability. And by the way, the reason I mentioned earlier about the different layers is because you'll find that, somebody may have between 0 and 250,000. That's insurance company A. Then insurance company B is from 250 to $1 million. Okay. Well, it's amazing how when you get to that $250,000 threshold, that getting $1 over that becomes a real obstacle. And it's not because the damage isn't there; it's because that means the next layer needs to kick in. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's all kinds of stuff. But anyway, back to this particular claim. So we got it all the way up to there, and there's actually another $250,000 plus or minus dollars for law and ordinance, which is code upgrade. Okay. Well, the city approved the work that these guys did prior to the occurrence. They have certificates, they have warranties from the manufacturers. They did everything right, and but the carrier has unilaterally decided that they violated the building codes. Well, so we've been going around and around with the carrier, saying that the carrier doesn't get to interpret the building code and be the judge and jury. The city adopts the building code, and they enforce it. And they say these guys did not do anything that would warrant poor workmanship, or that they were not in compliance with the International Building Code. So this is a part of the dispute of a claim. We're at on the 10-yard line, and they need these monies so that they can be in compliance with the city code, right? And do the work properly, not just for the city code, but also for when they want to renew their insurance, or if they fall out of love or get dropped by this insurance company, or they have to refinance, or they want to sell, whatever the case may be. But they have the endorsement. They had an occurrence. It requires it. And so we don't know exactly where this is going to go. We've made demands and set deadlines with them, and hopefully they'll come back and they'll do the right thing. But I can tell you this, we've been stuck on this one point for a few months, and a lot of it has to do with the temperament of the policyholder. And they've been fantastic to work with, but they also realize that, you know what, we've exhausted everything, and they need to make a coverage decision. And they're either going to do it, and they're going to do it by this date, date X, or, you know, that's why we have courthouses. And so my point is that, you know, we got them 80% there. Hopefully we'll get them 100%. But at this point, you know, the only other thing that we can do is we can start asking for stuff like underwriting files. Well, what was the condition of these roofs at the time when you guys extended coverage and you took the premium? Did you say it was in bad condition? Did you say they had not met with the code compliance? And see, they won't give me that information because that's considered confidential, and that's something that would come out in discovery.
Right.
Then you need an attorney. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. God, that sounds like a nightmare of a process. I mean, this example you just gave, it's such a catch-22 as well. You know, it's just, what is the right process and how can you expedite that process and get through it quickly, you know, and still come out, you know, in a fair situation being the property owner, you know, and with dealing with a situation like this. So, well,
and you can see that, you know, the interpretation of the policy and building codes and statutes and that, it's just that. It's open to interpretation. And therein lies the rub.
So in a situation like this, assuming that, let's assume that, you know, let's talk about an apartment building. You know, you have some kind of roof damage or something to where a few of the units aren't habitable at that point in time because there's water leaking and whatever it might be. So you come up with with lost revenue. So business interruption insurance. I mean, how does that all play into this as this claim is moving forward? Is that something that can be paid out in real time, or is that also part of the entire claim as a whole?
Yeah, usually there's an advance that's given, and that's another good point, is that when there's a catastrophic event, that usually you get an advance to cover your mitigation and loss of use, loss of rent, usually like after 72 hours. And yeah, they'll give you an advance. You know, you can ask for, 3 months and then after that, you know, we may end up having to ask every month for, you know, a 2-month advance or 3 month or whatever. But you have to continually stay on it. And then the other thing that's interesting is we've had business interruption losses that we've adjusted that, you know, the carrier may take an entire market instead of a sub-market and go, oh, well, the entire market for, you know, whatever, Houston is 90 cents a square foot. But, you know, what if your property is in a high rent district and you're actually getting $1.40 a square foot? Right. Well, you have to have access to the kind of information that you can support it, and go, no, look, this is what it is, or you can show the your rent roll or your loss. Your trailing income and expenses and things of that nature. But you know, if you have a unit that let's say during the course of the claim the lease was expired, right? Well, you would have renewed and raised. So you need to have real-time information as to what the market rents are in your particular submarket for your particular asset class, and submit that to the carrier. Otherwise, you're just going to go whatever is, you know, just generally publicly available.
Okay. So I know this is kind of a loaded question, but how do we get through this entire process in a timely manner? I mean, is it kind of it pretty much revolves around, I mean, if we have a good insurance carrier or not. I mean, if we've done everything on our end, right? I mean, if we've documented everything, we've made the claim, hired a public adjuster like yourself, I mean, is there anything else we can do as a policyholder to expedite this process, or is it kind of in the hands of God at that point in time?
No, I mean, the things that a policyholder can do is, anything that you have, like, for, you know, maintenance records, materials that you paid for, if you have equipment, receipts that you paid for, any type of appraisals. If you did a refinance lately, ask your mortgage company for a copy of your appraisal. If you recently purchased it, inspection reports. All those things are things that can support the condition of the property prior to an occurrence. Okay, and patience. It is a process. I kind of make an analogy of, if I have ankle surgery today, I'm not going to be skiing tomorrow. I have to have a healing process, and it's just that. And fortunately, most commercial owner-operators, because of the nature of this business, are are whether they like it or not, are forced to practice patience, because this is not a turn and burn kind of industry. But it's the same deal. You know, when you're dealing with an insurance claim, you have to be reasonable. You don't want to be popping off and threatening lawsuits. They're going to interpret that as anticipation litigation, and then you won't have a choice. Then you'll be forced into a lawsuit. So that's why it's really important to know, you know, how to handle the insurance companies and the adjusters. And you know what we do, our MO is to, you know, I just feel like a lot of times we just do the carrier's job for them. I mean, frankly, a lot of adjusters that work for insurance companies are extremely overworked. I mean, they have got a huge workload, and I'm good friends with some of these guys, and some of them that used to work for carriers are some of the best public adjusters I've worked with. But their caseloads are insane. I could not handle what they're doing, you know, not effectively. There's no way. So, you know, the way I look at it, the way we approach it is we document, we photograph, we estimate, we go through everything. We put together what I call a claim package with a demand, which means that, you know, this is our estimate. This is the price and the scope, and then you know, we do things that comply with the policy, and we'll point that out and send it in and go, you know, if you need anything else, let us know. But we've completed our investigation to date. Here it is. And then the carriers typically have a duty to either extend coverage or provide a written explanation as to why they're not. And then if they have a reasonable explanation, you know, maybe you'd overlook something. Maybe there's something that the policyholder could have put in differently, or we could have approached differently, or maybe they're just misinterpreting something, whatever the case may be. But, you know, we typically try to give them multiple opportunities to do the right thing. If we sense that the policyholder's wishes are to escalate it, we don't just take it the second that they say that and say, you know, well, we're going to stick this, you know, this attorney on you guys and you're going to rue the day. We'll give them multiple opportunities. And that's what we advise our clients, to do the right thing. Because if you go back and you ask them several times, hey, you know what, we're non-litigious, we don't want to be confrontational, we want to get this thing done, you have to be firm but friendly. You know, you have to imagine what that's going to look like to opposing counsel or to a jury. You know, if your claim file is a bunch of, you know, you cussing and calling them and their mother every name in the book, it's not going to bode well for you.
Oh, really? Come on. Sometimes I can make progress doing that, right?
I know. You're using logic now, but in the heat of the moment, you know, and you find yourself repeating yourself the same thing 10 times, and you're getting the same response and answer, which is not going your way. People tend to lose their cool pretty quick.
Yeah, no, absolutely they do. Okay, well, so you know, you had mentioned in the beginning of the show that that sometimes contractors can act as public adjusters as well. Let's talk about that real quick before we go on to, I know the next topic is about, you know, interviewing to find the right adjuster to, you know, to suit your needs and to work on your behalf. Let's talk about the difference between a contractor and a public adjuster and which one, you know, we should really use. Okay. Well,
the contractors are not authorized to adjust insurance claims. So just to be clear,
and a lot of them advertise that they can, right? Okay, so just
they
beware,
insurance,
listener, beware.
You got to watch out for stuff like that. Yes, and you know, and frankly, my experience has been a lot of them just don't even know what they don't know. They don't know that they're not supposed to be doing that, and a lot of it is because there is no licensing in many of the states for general contractors. You know, I know for sure Texas is one. I know Florida is one that doesn't. I mean, they do require a license, and so the guys that are untrained, there's no continuing education, there's no licensing. They're the ones that, you know, a lot of times are holding themselves out as insurance claim specialists. We see their contracts. They say that they're going to negotiate the insurance claim on their behalf, blah, blah, blah. They have no authority to do that, and the insurance companies know it. And so even though you may have a great contractor, he's a really nice person, or she's a great gal, maybe very knowledgeable, maybe even works as an insurance adjuster with an insurance company, it doesn't matter. They cannot, they are not legally allowed to adjust claims. Now, does it happen? Yeah, it does. But you got to remember that your insurance company, especially if you're doing large commercial losses, they know the show. and they know they don't have any authority to settle claims. And by the way, the sword cuts both ways. So when the insurance company wants to bring out their preferred vendor, okay, to work, to adjust a claim, we tell them no, because they don't have authority to settle a claim.
Okay, gotcha. So beware is the best way to put it. Beware. And I'm assuming that when big claims happen, I'm assuming there's some some lions out there that are contractors that are just watching for those kind of, it's public information, right? Or if a fire happens or something, or a hurricane comes through, they're out there pouncing through these neighborhoods or reaching out to property owners, probably representing themselves as adjusters, right? Or saying that they can help, that they can assist in the situation.
Yeah.
Is that a big problem? I'm assuming it is.
It is. In Texas, for sure. States that have unlicensed contractors, for sure. Yeah. And the ironic thing, Kevin, is that my experience has been the legitimate contractors who live and operate in the states, like, in Texas, they want licensing.
I'm sure.
They want it because they want to keep the riffraff out. They got all these guys that blow in, and people get you don't want to go from the frying pan into the fire, and it makes me cringe. And that's one of the reasons why we do these free educational seminars through GPA, so that people know what to be looking for and looking out for, especially when it comes to the general contractors. Most people are shocked to learn that, at least in Texas, that there's no licensing for general contractors and roofers.
That blows my mind. I mean, allowing individuals that are unlicensed to deal with the structural integrity of your property or building, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, but the person who cuts your hair has to have a license.
Yeah, right. Even in Texas, they do?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh, what a joke. That's pretty funny. Okay,
so figure that one out.
So give me like the top questions that we need to ask when interviewing a public adjuster. Make sure we find the right one and get filter out the riffraff or the ones that won't be all that promising to work with.
Find out how long they've been a public adjuster. Ask them, how many times, what's your close ratio for selling a claim versus attorneys or appraisal. And if they start talking real quickly about, a team, an appraiser, an attorney, and they're not really talking more about settling, getting, what they're going to do to settle it, that could be a red flag. You want to make sure that they are not actively working for both an insurance company and acting as a public adjuster. Now, there are people out there that have dual licenses, but you really don't want them to be actively working for both. With two heads is, what do they call that, a dual-headed monster or something along those lines.
It's just a conflict of interest. I mean, a massive
there you
conflict
go.
of interest.
It's a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
If they have roofing, that's the whole thing. That's why contractors aren't authorized to adjust insurance claims. You wouldn't want the guy who's doing you wouldn't want your real estate agent to also do your building inspection before you purchase a property, right?
I'm sure they'll find nothing wrong with it, right?
Bingo. Right. Yeah. So,
okay.
And also, I always like to run, rip-off report after I'll put their name or their company name and then type in rip-off report or pending lawsuit or bear tree, things like that.
Is Ripoff Report a legitimate website? I've always thought that was one of those websites to where they kind of
is it? I don't know.
They stranglehold you. Like, for instance, there's websites out there for those that they have a felony or whatever. I know, like here in Florida, like if you get pulled over for a DUI or anything that to where you have a mugshot. Literally,
I don't know about that.
Yeah, these websites, they literally send you a letter in the mail basically saying that they will take your picture off of their public website that they've taken from the sheriff's website, and you have to pay them like $300. I mean, it's kind of a joke. It's a big sham, but it's legal. It's legal. And so I'm wondering, I always wondered if Ripoff Report's the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know, but you know what? Here's the thing. I mean, usually what tips me off is if there's something legit, like it's tied to a newspaper article or something like that.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
It's public information.
Okay, that's a good point.
The other thing is you want to make sure that the scope of services is identified in their contract. Okay, and then let's see. There was one other thing I wanted to make sure that you check out. I don't know. I can't remember. My mind went blank.
That's okay. That's old age, by the way.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll come to me in a minute.
Yeah, no problem. We can fill it back in there as well. I can put it in the show notes. You can shoot me an email once you remember it if you don't remember before we hang up here today. So not a problem. I'll make sure that the listeners get it one way or another. And is there anything else we need to know about this entire process, Scott, before we close things out for the day?
Well, I would just say, just remember that it's a process. Have reasonable expectations. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because, you can pocket the money and not do repairs doesn't mean you should, because it's going to come back and haunt you, okay? There's a whole bunch of tips that we have on how to interview the contractors and what to ask them and things of that nature. I know what I was going to say. You want to make sure they're licensed, not just them personally, but you want to make sure that their company is licensed.
Okay.
You would be surprised. You'd be very surprised how many of these guys are not, their company isn't licensed. And it's their company who you're entering a contract with, and it's their company whose name is on the check. So you want to be sure that their actual company is licensed by the state.
Okay. That's good to know. So you're saying that's pretty common, that you'll find public adjusters out there that are operating on maybe they have a public adjuster's license, but the company they work for, the company that they supposedly own, isn't licensed. So there should be two separate series of licenses. Is what you're getting at?
Okay. Yep. I've seen it many, many a time.
Okay, that's good information to know.
And I'll tell you one other thing that would be good for any policyholder that's listening is to Google, whatever state you live in, and then insurance code for claims handling practices. So in other words, Texas Insurance Code, claim handling practices, okay, under 541 and 542, talks all about the methods of claim practices, unfair claim settling practices, things of that nature. It kind of gives you a rule book of what a carrier is, what their obligations are to perform when they're handling a claim for you.
Okay, that's good advice. And you'd mentioned also you have some additional tips and consumer right information that you have available. Is that on your website or?
It's at TexasPolicyholderAdvocates.org.
Okay, so TexasPolicyholderAdvocates.org. Okay, fantastic.
And I may as well announce on your radio show, you can be the first to hear it, is that we just acquired this past week PolicyholderAdvocates.org. And we will probably be rolling this organization out in other states in the very near future. Okay. So if there's anybody listening that has interest in heading up a consumer advocacy group for insurance policyholders, home and business owners, please reach out to us and let us know what state you're in so we can possibly put it together.
Okay. Scott, what's the best way they can reach you? Best email address that you can give out?
It's Scott at TexasPolicyholderAdvocates.org.
Okay, fantastic. And if you are in the state of Texas, then the group is already there. It's in effect. So you guys have a couple events coming up, and I think you put on events quite often. So if you want to go ahead and tell our listeners, we have a big listener base in Texas. So why don't you give some information out about those upcoming events that you have and where they're located?
Well, you just go to our website, again, TexasPolicyholderAdvocates.org, and there's an event section, there's a professional section, there's a place there for policyholders and to contact us, and a join, of course, for members. And so the upcoming events, we have one on Thursday, March 24th in Garland, Texas, and then we have another one scheduled for April 7th in Garland, Texas, for those that were impacted by the tornadoes. We'll probably be doing one in Fort Worth, which just got hammered last week with hail, and we've been talking about possibly doing some in the next couple of months on the coast side in anticipation of hurricane season. So people are we're trying to be proactive so people can reach out to us not just when they have a disaster, but also ahead of time. Yep. And frankly, it's been interesting. We've had a number of people that have come to our seminars who have no damage at all. They just want to become more educated and better educated consumers, which we're happy to have.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, that's great that you guys are doing that. Thank you very much for your time and your service. I mean, this is free education. I mean, you don't charge anything for these seminars.
Nope.
I mean, it costs you money because you're traveling around the state of Texas and soon to be the country teaching about this. So
we have great sponsors and a great board of directors that's been phenomenal in helping to support us, and our members are fantastic. They're just great people.
That's great. Well, awesome, Scott. Is there anything else before we get going here? We're about out of time. Before we get going to say goodbye to one another, is there anything else that our listeners need to know about regarding this process? Again, they can go to your website, find out more information. They can also go learn more about you and your company by going to insuranceclaimrecoverysupport.com. And you've already given out your email address there. Is there anything else or any last parting words that you'd like to share with them before we go?
Just, be patient and find people that can help you, that you trust your gut. Storm business is big business, and it brings out some really good people and it brings out some really awful people. So just use your head, trust your gut, do your due diligence, just like if you're buying an apartment or a commercial property, and just go with intuition and don't just jump at the first person that knocks on your door, because there are guys out there they have radio scanners and they just hunt. But the thing is that you need someone that can close and get you settled so you can move on with life and get back to business.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, Scott, thank you again for coming back on the show. Again, second time around, you've given us a ton of information here these past two interviews, and I really appreciate it. And
it's my pleasure.
Yeah. No, it's been very insightful. I know I've learned a ton myself, and I've even been through this process before. So I thank you again, my friend, and we'll look forward to to touch base with you again and have you on another show. So you take care and have a great week.
I appreciate it. Keep in touch, Kevin. Thank you.
Congratulations! Now you've got more of the best tricks of the trade in building massive amounts of passive income from real estate. For more amazing resources, visit realestateinvestingforcashflow.com, and we'll see you next Monday morning.